well considered.
Welcome to another Frame Rate, the podcast where we rate frames. I'm Abe Epperson, one of the co-hosts of this show, and I'm along with my other co-host, Speak.
Michael Swaim, sir. And I just got that. Rate frames.
Cool.
That's good. The old switcheroo.
Yeah, you just got the joke? Yeah. Who I don't even know who wrote that joke. It just has always existed.
Yeah, I believe we found it carved at the bottom of the sea, and we stole it.
But just so we can make sure that, because we know our guest has a little has a quirk that he doesn't like to speak in podcasts until his name is said. I don't know why. It's just a thing.
Beetlejuice.
It's probably my guess is it's probably a sex thing, and since I have him quiet right now, I can say what I want. But introduce yourself, guests. Who's joining us? Who are you?
Say my name, Abe.
Oh, God damn it. This is Daniel O'Brien.
Oh,
friend.
you were right. It is a sex thing, and you're part of it. And that makes it more sexual to me. Like, I like that you know about it. It used to just be...
I do.
It used to just be an internal thing, and now you're part of it. Now you're part of the sex thing.
Great.
Now we're all complicit.
Yeah,
hey, that's only a half truth.
Well, welcome back, man. It's always good to have you on this place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Last time we had you on, you had killed 75 fish. How many fish have you killed since then?
Oh man, not as much. I would say I
gotta get those numbers up.
I caught a whole lot more sharks than I'd ever anticipated in my life. Tiny sharks, like sand sharks, dog sharks that you get out on the East Coast, and you don't keep those. So I didn't kill them. I just caught them and threw them back. Meanwhile, I'm just catching a lot of fucking porgies, a lot of scud as we call them.
Wait, I thought porgy was a dog. Are you fishing at the dog beach? Because that's not cool.
Yeah, no. I mean. But, like, it's so easy to catch them. You just, put treats on there, and you're like, come. And they're, like, well-trained dogs. They just hop right on it, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm never going to correct my knowledge on that. So, great. Go ahead.
Today, I'm going to segue because this has been enough banter. I enjoy you guys, but I'm here to do something.
It's exactly the right amount of banter.
Yeah, exactly the right amount. So today we're jumping into the 2010 film, directed and co-written by Edgar Wright. We're real big fans. The film Scott Pilgrim versus the World. So first off, before we dip into like all the things we want to talk about, when was the first time you saw this film, Daniel?
I first saw this movie, or do you need me to say film?
No.
Okay. I first saw this movie. I first saw this big long sketch, this little skit, on like an early Friday afternoon, maybe Friday morning. I should have been at work, but I wasn't. It was the opening weekend, and I just really wanted to see it. And I saw it with our mutual friend, Lisa Marie King, because she was free that day.
Oh,
and I was just like, I want to blow off work, and like I want to see this movie as soon as possible for me. So we saw like a 10:30 a.m. showing in Santa Monica, and I feel like 10 seconds into that movie, I turned to her and I was like, I'm having such a good time. I immediately loved this movie. I saw it as soon as possible, loved it. The movie ended, and we got up and hugged each other, which is not a normal thing that you do at the end of a movie, but it was just like two people who had a really great time. It was like, I have so much joy, and I don't know how to express it, and I'm going to use my body to do it, I guess. And that was my first experience with this movie, and I'd seen it many times since then where I didn't touch anybody afterwards. And that's progress.
And that's progress. Yeah, I'm glad you said.
And then O'Brien and the Kings, your two-person band, lasted, 5-6 weeks? That was an interesting period.
O'Brien and the Kings, we prefer the OKs.
The OKs,
yeah. You really sold out is something I wanted to say.
Songs that make you feel okay.
Did you guys know going into this film about, like, how much did you know about the comic book? Like, had you read it? Or was it just like, it's based on it?
It's considered a manga. It's considered an English language manga, but That's all I know about it. Enough to be
Man, that stuff. I
condescending
try
my
to be the
friends.
most insufferable person on a podcast, and I got my
know.
work cut out for me.
Good luck, dude.
I knew nothing about it, and then when I saw the trailer for it, because at this point I was an Edgar Wright fan forever.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing he could do wrong. Like Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. I think it was you guys who introduced me to Spaced. And then I'd reach a certain point. There was like, no matter what he does, it's right. It's correct. I'm a fan. It's the right thing to do. So when I saw the preview for Scott Pilgrim, I already knew I'm going to see this movie because it's Edgar Wright. And then I went and got the comics after the first trailer came out and read all of them.
Oh, so you actually have read them. Are they as delightful, and how close is it? Because that was my one hesitation doing this episode, is that obviously people in the comments will be mad we didn't read the comics, which I haven't. I was just aware of them when they existed. Do they hold up to the movie? Are they similar?
They're very similar. There's some more fantastical elements in the comics, like that subspace that they go into occasionally in the movie. They do a lot more of in the comics. And I think the biggest digression from the comics to the movies, that if there's one thing that bugs me, it's this, is that Kim gets much more to do in the comics, or she gets more fleshed out. Like the final comic, I think it's called Final Season or Final Episode or Final Act, whatever it is, the last comic in the series, Scott just goes to Kim's hometown and they talk about in depth his relationship to her, and they give that more meat, more heft, more weight, and they don't really do that in the movie, which is a bummer.
Yeah, the movie to me felt like, especially this time watching it recently, that Edgar Wright, and a factoid is that he resisted directing this for 6 years, because before this he had only directed things he'd written, and of course he worked on the screenplay for this, but the idea of it being an adaptation sort of caused him to hesitate. And I feel like he must have decided to pull the trigger when he realized, I can just turn this into Spaced. And I'm wondering if in the comics it feels like Spaced, or if that's something that Edgar Wright just brought to it, because I gotta say, this time through I realized for the first time, oh, this was such a natural extension. It's like the US high budget movie version of all the tricks he pulls in Spaced. Like, I know the Seinfeld scene is not in the comics, for example. That's something that would happen in Spaced. And there's a few things like that that really made me think that might have been how he bridged it for himself conceptually, like adapting someone's comic.
No, that's interesting. I never made the connection of this being like an extension of Spaced. I did feel like it was the most sensical pairing of source material to director of anything in the world. Like, you can say they're like Wolf of Wall Street or The Departed. That source material with Martin Scorsese, sure, that makes so much sense. It's crime, it's betrayal, it's undercover, it's heavily male. That makes sense. But there's no more logical pairing than the raw materials of Scott Pilgrim and the talent and oeuvre of Edgar Wright, to me.
Yeah, and we've talked about I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak for Abe, but I called Ichi the Killer on a recent episode the most faithful comic book movie, and I'm immediately proven wrong, because this beats that as far as capturing and translating the medium of comics to the medium of film.
Right.
I agree with you. I think that's what makes it work, and that's why I should read the comics, because I want to feel out how that match happened. But this might, for my money, be the most competent visual effects film ever. Like, I don't know how. I can't believe it still looks so good and not dated, and every effect is so woven into the visual and well conceived. I can't see how it would ever look bad. It's
such a meticulous movie. Every bit of it just seems like there's not a single frame of this movie that was lazy. Which is insane to me.
Edgar Wright, as I've said a few times to people who, like, when you really base it down to what makes him like a great auteur, every director has a toolbox, like a toolkit, which they employ, and some are broader than others. He's got a fairly broad one, and he's always at his best when he's dealing with choreography, pacing, and most notably editing proper. I mean, you can also throw into the mix a bunch of things like he's very funny. He has a great color palette choices. Like he does a lot of smart things that other directors do, but what makes him stand out in those like three different disciplines is just his absolute ability to remark style in any movie and anything he touches. And it's just, I have to say that this movie, amongst all of his other movies, like for me, Hot Fuzz is a perfect screenplay, but this is his visual masterpiece.
Yeah. I would agree
I'll
with that.
say this. I thought Guy Ritchie really knew what he was doing until I saw an Edgar Wright movie, and I was like, never mind this.
Yeah, especially this one. This one is like comparing the highlight reel to the dailies of like a Guy Ritchie movie. So of course, he's impeccable in what he doesn't show as well. Everything is so meticulous, as you said, Daniel.
Right. There's a scene I think about all the time, which is Knives showing up at Scott's apartment with Kieran Culkin.
Bales.
What's his name?
Wallace.
What's Kieran Culkin's character's name?
Wallace Wells.
Wallace. Yes, thank you so much. When she shows up and he dives out the window, and you kind of see him, but Wallace closes the door a little bit just so you see just enough of him dive out the window so that joke lands, and then you cut back to Knives and you see him you see Scott casually walking away behind her. It's like a bit of, I don't want to say physical comedy, because it's
blocking.
not like clown stuff, but like blocking comedy, choreographed comedy. It's
absolutely visual comedy. Absolutely.
It's like those old farces where the Italian actors would run in and out of doors simultaneously. It'd be like, but they were just here. Yeah.
And it's just so elegantly done and so perfect and so funny, and like every actor was on board, the cinematographer was on board, the editor was on board, the choreography was on board. It was just like every single person was united in the vision of the execution of this scene, and it made it perfect. And that's like
true.
a micro version of the movie itself.
Yeah, a lot of movies exist solely with the collaboration of so many people, and they'll get by with like, well, maybe the art department didn't do their job in this scene, or it's not their fault, but they were rushed or whatever, but the actors are killing it, so it's fine. Edgar Wright does scenes where it literally wouldn't work unless every department executed perfectly, so it's like showing off. You're like, everyone.
A perfect example, like they're at the time of this recording, Avengers Endgame just came out for like streaming and buying a couple days ago. So I've rewatched it multiple times since it came out because I'm that guy. Boy. And with it comes a whole lot of bonus features and like bloopers and outtakes and everything, and a couple of scenes that they shot that were eventually cut. And you watch these scenes that they shot that got cut, and it's like, why the fuck would you ever make that scene? These are movies that are just like throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And it's such a tremendous contrast to Edgar Wright, who I assume is just like, no, this is the movie that we're making, period. We're going to do this. We don't need the extra stuff that's going to get cut. We're going to make this movie. This is the vision, and we're going to execute it.
And that's what all right, so not to bring, I guess I am, so why do I say not to? But to bring in something we were talking about pre-recording, I recently had the immense pleasure of speaking with J. Todd Anderson, who's the storyboard artist for most of the Coen brothers films. He also works on lots of movies, and he was talking about,
I would love if that was his resume. It was like, oh, Coen brothers and lots of movies. But yeah, he was just talking about how like he did the Warcraft movie, the Duncan Jones movie, and he was like, man, I was like, was it fun to draw orcs instead of humans? And he's like, it's fun. It was just like that movie was so much more time because
they're figuring it out. It changes, it evolves, meaning I redraw sequences over and over and over and over with slight differences. So I'll be like, all right, here's this orc again for the 50th time, but he's sad now, I guess, because they changed it. Now his brother dies. Whereas, and then I was like, what about the Coen brothers? And he goes, I think I saw one yellow page once 15 years ago. And if you're, for the uninitiated, a yellow page is a revised script page on set. Meaning, he is like, they know exactly what they're doing. They come in and they go, literally like second by second, draw this. And he's a storyboard artist, and he just draws what they say. And I feel like Edgar Wright must be very much the same, because there's just no other way you could accomplish this. The one that gets me is how every single Evil X goes, Scott Pilgrim, and it cuts to a Western style close up of their eyes, split screen with Scott Pilgrim going, what? And when G-Man, Gideon, what's his name guy?
Jason Schwartzman.
Jason Schwartzman, who is the coolest, sexiest guy ever, as shown by this movie. When he does it, it does the exact same thing, but then he's going, Scott Pilgrim, hey buddy, welcome to the theater. How you doing, man? I'm glad you came out. Like, also, shit like that cannot be accomplished without everyone on set getting the joke. And I don't...
Right.
Working at Cracked, I think, like, your layman underappreciates how hard it is. You're like, the AD has to get the joke. The set designer has to get the joke. Like, know what this moment is doing and why. That's really hard to communicate to that many people.
I think it's a tremendous hallmark of a great director if every single person involved shares the same vision as the director, and they're just like, yep, we get it. We're all on the same page. And Edgar Wright does that, I feel like. Jordan Peele does that, like every element of Get Out, which is like, oh, every single person in every aspect of this film was on the same page.
Yeah. You Michael Cera guys? How do you feel about Jen, my lovely lady friend, was, walking in and out seeing it, and she was like, I like this movie, but Michael Cera, I don't know. And I really like Michael Cera. So I wanted to bring it up. What are your thoughts?
I do too. I think he's a very good actor. I think he's a really smart actor. I like the choices that he makes. I think he's a character actor that people aren't writing roles for him, really. Like, I don't know. Maybe
Jesse Eisenberg is getting those roles, but
yeah, maybe he'll grow up in 15 years and he'll look different. But he's got such a specific look that he sort of has to be this awkward, nerdy side character, this George Michael Bluth type.
Yeah.
And Scott Pilgrim is one of the only sensible roles for him to be a leading man, because otherwise I think he should stick to being a character actor. And I don't say stick to in any kind of derogatory sense, like it's a step down or anything like that. I just mean that until Hollywood smartens up and writes leading man parts for character actors, he should be a character actor, second lead in a movie. And this is the only sensible reason for him to be a first lead.
He's a perfect fit for the movie.
Yeah.
It is kind of an Arrested Development reunion, though, I realized this time. Well, I always know
Mae Whitman.
Egg was in it. A plant, whatever her name is. But
Mae Whitman.
Mae Whitman. But her? But there was at least one more I noticed. Anyway, I'll remember it as we go through our notes. But yeah, I also like Michael Cera a lot. I feel like, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, because it sounds like, or you said you've read the comics. I feel like from the images I've seen of Scott Pilgrim flipping through, it's not even a perfect Scott Pilgrim as drawn is not necessarily as scrawny as Michael Cera actually is, but I think he's perfect in it. And
I do too.
Did you guys know?
What next? How do we attack this thing?
I mean, there's a broad strokes, just things that I want to hear your reactions to. But I wanted to talk about Bill Pope. That's my big, thing that I'm soapbox I was going to stand on today.
Now who's that?
But before that, did you guys knew that this is a fairly notorious box office bomb?
Yes.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It only got 15 million, and it took about 90 million to make.
Yeah, it shows.
But
It looks
of
very
cour- yeah.
clean. Yeah.
And one of those reasons why they took such a gamble and they gave a lot of attention to it is, obviously Edgar Wright, who hadn't had at this point as crazy success in America, but everyone knew he was like an auteur, that's coming on scene, like Hot Fuzz. Like people were considering like this is a comedy, but also like, I mean, just look at it. Should we consider it for like Oscars? It was,
For visual
doing well on
effects,
BAFTAs.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of visual effects in this movie, and I want to direct you to the name of the director of photography, which is Bill Pope. And I just want to list off what else Bill Pope has done. So one of the big ones that you'll like, Michael, is that in 1990 he shot Darkman. He shot Army of Darkness.
Ooh.
He shot Clueless. He shot
Okay.
Zero Effect.
Oh
he shot
my God.
all of the Matrix. All of the Matrixes.
Wow.
Did
Does that mean-
did he shoot the sequel to Darkman, Darkman 2, Die, Darkman, Die?
No, he did not.
Is that
Damn.
real?
What?
That's
The
real.
title-
Darkman 2?
There was
Die,
a Darkman
Darkman,
2?
Die?
I assume it's Daniel.
Wow.
There's at least 3, there might be 4 Darkman movies.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
He
Wow.
shot Spider-Man 2, Team America World Police,
Oh, that's
Spider-Man 3,
That's impressive.
and then after Scott Pilgrim, Men in Black 3, World's End,
With Michael
just a bunch of,
Stuhlbarg from Serious
Baby
Man.
Driver. So he's like visual effects master. He
Did
also
he-
shot The Spirit, that forgotten
I
That
love
movie
that movie.
sucks so bad.
So sucks, but looks good, right? Looks kind of
It
good.
does. I got
but
eggs
anyway,
on my
like,
face. Wait, do
that's-
you know, since he shot all the matrices, did he invent bullet time? Like, was it his idea?
He was. Yes. He's
That's
one of the fathers of bullet time.
if I'm not going to waste time going into it, but if you look up how it works, it's such a good idea that you're like, how did they not think of that in the 1930s? You could have done this at any time, and it's an
a Cera
amazing
trope,
effect. Yeah.
It's fantastic. He's working with like a fairly young Edgar Wright, who's still like confident in his work, very good.
Right.
But like
I
he's
think,
kind
like,
of an older DP who knows like, all right, you want to do this crazy new visual styling, and he was just like, yeah, I'm on board. And there's so much visual effects.
So
like,
Edgar
it's
doesn't-
almost like a CG movie.
Edgar Wright doesn't have like a consistent standard DP.
I mean, I think the same person who shot Shaun of the Dead shot Hot Fuzz. I'm not entirely sure about that, but no, he doesn't have super consistency.
Wow,
In fact,
I always assumed.
in fact,
there
Bill
was, like-
Pope is kind of as consistent as it gets at this point.
Huh. Did Bill Pope also do World's End and Baby Driver?
He did indeed.
Okay.
So he also works with Joe Cornish a lot. He didn't shoot the Attack of the Block, but he did shoot the new one, The Kid Who Would Be King. So he also shot Alita Battle Angel. So he like jumps over. He like, all right, Guillermo del Toro, all right, like he'll move around because that's how DPs do. He's just one of the best people he's like a name that no one really knows.
Yeah.
That is one of the best craftsmen alive today in his trade, and he's one of the major reasons this film looks and feels entirely unique.
Yeah.
Like entirely. No one, you haven't seen anything like it if you haven't seen it. And it has to do a lot with things like the amount of work that is done in compositing in this. It's not just like the light flashes and like the fact that you get
Video game
like a lot of
pop-ups and
bright
shit.
colors and video game, like everyone has like crazy rim light, so they're like pushed out of the background. You mentioned moments, Daniel, where we were talking about like how all the departments are working together. Sometimes it's just one department where it's like in the breakup with Knives, like how her background just turns off, and you're like, that does not seem possible because that looked like a fully lit thing. And then all of a sudden, it's like partly he turns off lights, like an orchestra of light, but also there's a lot of studio work and there's a lot of compositing that's done where they're literally etching the frame together, because sometimes some things are at 24 frames per second and other things are at 120 frames per second. So it's truly a technical marvel. And that's something that people don't give a lot of credit to. They just see the final image. The sheer amount of work that went into that, just from a visual post effect
and that it all
standpoint.
means stuff. It has that Arrested
Yeah.
Development quality where, for example, when they're fighting in Chaos Theater, it must have taken a lot of work visual effects wise
Right.
to make their bodies flash red when they're in danger, but that also effectively blurs the mediums of the media of video games and film in a
Right.
meaningful way. Like I love, like it's not just when they get hit, it's that he slides to the edge and grabs on and he flashes red. And it,
Right.
like your neurons, it's just an amazing feeling. Your neurons that respond to film grammar are firing because you're like, a character's hanging from a cliff. Ah, shot of the fingers curled around the ledge, danger. But also, if you've played a lot of video games, you're like, but also, he's hemorrhaging points and he's flashing red. He must be one hit away from dying. And it's all baked in organically and you experience it instantaneously.
And there's not a ton of CG. Obviously, there's the battle with the twins, like things
the
like
Yeti
the
versus the
P-bar,
dragons.
gorilla.
Yeah.
But like I think in my opinion, I think in like a few decades, we're gonna look at this movie as something that is, if it's still relevant and still enjoyed, it will be something that people look to and go, before CG really caught hold and every solution was just to do CG, kind of like even in the more visually like aesthetic choices, not just in like Transformer monsters. I'm talking about like in Black Panther where there's like that sequence where things are slow and speeding up in a battle and stuff like that. We're doing a lot of that in camera, but we're doing more and more, and the trend is going towards CG to like kind of make it work on a compositing level. And I think that this film, so much of it, more than you'd expect, is in camera, and that's just something that is awesome to point out. In my opinion, he's just really good. I mean, he gave us bullet time.
Yeah, and
So-
that's what I think keeps it timeless, or in the sense that the two that stand out in my mind are Final Fantasy VII. When I first played Final Fantasy VII, I thought it was photorealistic, which is insane. It makes me wonder about the nature of the human brain. But I remember loading up the cutscenes and going, oh, we've reached the pinnacle of computer-generated graphics. Wow.
They nailed it. That's what arms look like.
Yeah,
His arms look like
huge
arms.
bulbs.
And then Harry Potter 1, and specifically when they're in the bathroom fighting the ogre to save Hermione, and the ogre, and Harry gets on the ogre's head and sticks a wand up its nose or whatever, and the ogre's thrashing around, and Harry jarringly becomes a CG blob that's like swirling around and then turns back into an actor. I mean,
I have not seen that. I'll have to take your word for it. I've still not seen any of the Harry Potters. Shout out
People
to
who've
Star,
seen it-
who is mad at me.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's a vicious, brutal person. So that's just, we all know that about Star. But they call her Shooting Star because she's murdered so many people. But I can't, and I wonder if I'm being fooled again, but this movie's 9 years old at this point. The graphics are so smart because they're not going, look, make a fake Harry Potter, full body, photorealistic with hair and cloth. And you're like, well, only Pixar really is able to do that and fool the eye at this point. Oh, well, do it anyway. And in 10 years when we look back on it, we'll be like, oh, well, that effect is dated. Am I wrong? I feel like Scott Pilgrim's graphics will not become dated because they're more abstract.
Because it's not really CG. It's mocking his style. That's the other thing, is that it's a stylistic approach that is born out of like the content. It feels like it should be a comic book, or it feels like a video game, like you were saying. So it's mimicking something as opposed to trying to pass the eyes of like this thing that clearly isn't real. We're trying to make photorealistic. It is photorealistic. It just has times and flourishes where it jumps into 8-bit, like the opener for like the Universal. Like it kind of from the get-go, it does things in a way that you're going like, this is not a very typical movie. They're going to just play with like reality. It's all elaborate metaphor. No one's actually doing fighting. It's like, it's even though it, and the other thing that Edgar Wright says is the way he conceived of this movie is that he thought of it like a musical. Instead of when they dance, they would fight.
Right. That comes across very clearly.
That very much scans, yeah. Okay, so we haven't even gotten into what the movie's about, because it is, and I think that speaks to something. It kind of is more of a technical achievement, and I'm not just talking graphics. I include on the acting level, editing, definitely, all these things. But I didn't find... Okay, I've said this like 20 times on various podcasts. I read Catcher in the Rye when I was like 23, and I was like, I already know all this. This is stupid.
Get a job.
This would have been amazing when I was 16, but I know all this shit already. Therefore, I'm bored. Do you care about the story of Scott Pilgrim?
I do.
Also,
me personally...
Is it fair?
Go ahead.
Because, sorry, it's a big argument on the internet that, and I'm not including the comics, because from what I understand for researching for this, the comics go into much greater detail about how Scott starts as a bad guy, and I accept, like, this kind of story I can get. Scott starts as a bad guy, so we have to go in depth with, like you said, Daniel, Kim, and find out how that affects her, so that and then by the end he learns truly and in a deep meditative and like way that spends enough time on it, why that was wrong, how to do things right, how it reflected a selfish outlook, and etc., etc. Whereas the movie more has kind of a vibe of, for 98% of the time, he treats women as sex objects to be won as a prize through fighting other dudes. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end, because it's a movie and it's shorter, he goes, oh, shit, I'm wrong. I cheated on you. I'm sorry. I should have manned up and apologized from day one.
And they immediately go,
and they're like, you learned your lesson. Good job. But I'm like, 4 minutes ago, he was the dick guy. So that's why I feel like whenever I talk about this movie with people that love it, we always end up gravitating towards the technical aspects. And I'm just wondering, is the story good? Like, if the effects were not that good?
Okay. I mean, I kind of think it is, but I'm also wrong about most things, so I'm open to that being the case.
I'd always rather hear from someone who likes something.
I don't think the story is particularly important, and I don't say that because I love the visual effects so much. I just mean that the story at its core is a very old story. It's two people who meet each other and they both have baggage, and they're trying to navigate each other's baggage to find connection and communication with each other. And that's the simplest thing in the world. It's happened to anyone who has ever been in a relationship in the history of the world, period. And this comic and then subsequent movie dramatized it with this video game comic book framework, because you just want to blow it out as much as you can. But it's still, at its core, that essential story is like, I have baggage too. We need to fight to if we want this thing to work, this thing between us, if we want it to work, there's going to be a lot of fights, and there's going to be drama, and at the end of the day, we're gonna go through it and communicate with each other.
Yeah,
which is like, it's not a story. I think that's clear. It's not a story in terms of like A, B, C, in terms of like inciting incident, something else, climax, whatever. But it's a story in terms of like, we want these people to be together. I don't think it's true love. I don't think they'll be together forever, but it's going to be the next step in both of their relationships going forward. And here's all the things that they need to deal with to get to the part where you can say, okay, now I'm present and I'm comfortable and I'm with you.
And I've matured one notch.
That's true.
Yeah,
I'd say that's true. I have slightly different reasons for why I don't really like the story of this, and it might just be my hang-up. I could be totally wrong about this, but I've never seen the charm of, and in fact, it usually kind of is a repulsion for me. The idea of like it's also very twee, and I don't just mean about like what they're wearing. I mean like it's got this mumblecore attitude where the people are like for example. I think I made like a jack off motion at the screen when he did his like, what's the first password? And he's like, whatever. And then what's the second password?
Sigh.
And they both work. And I'm like, I get it. There's some people who think that that's funny. It's very possible I just don't have a good sense of humor in that regard. But like to me, that makes unlikable characters. Like people who are like that in real life bother me a little bit. So I found them unlikable, and I couldn't help myself. But anytime that there was a concrete like conflict between characters, the resolution and the tactics in which they tried to employ their getting what they want and stuff like that were so like otherworldly to me that it feels like I can never truly get my grasp on what the problem is or what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing, because it doesn't feel right to me. Now, obviously, they're characters in not just in literal characters, but I mean they're like doing caricatures. They're versions and archetypes of people
in a
but
pretty
it still just
abstract
bothers
world.
Me.
Yeah, because like I would wonder. I mean, I still find myself wondering: do the people who get turned to coins, are they really dead? Does their family grieve for them? Are they gone from this world forever?
Right.
And that doesn't. You're not. That's not. It's an
be.
abstraction. You can't really play that game with this world.
Right. 'Cause I don't think they are. I don't think anyone's dead. I think every fight is a metaphor for a new couple, both of whom have baggage, getting together.
Yeah, like it's an avatar of the joint collaboration in like this null space of two people and what they think their relationship is.
If I start dating someone, I don't have to fight her ex-boyfriends, and I don't think the movie and manga are arguing that I do. I think what they're saying is you do need to grapple with the past and the baggage of the person that your partner, and they need to grapple with your own baggage.
Right. So
and you
I
can't
can
help yourself compare yourself to them.
Right, I get that. So like Matthew Patel coming in could have been he's not physically there. It's Scott reckoning with that part of her past. But at the end, at least in the film, I haven't read the comics, G-Man is physically real and like signs contracts and puts a chip in her brain and shit. And when he stabs G-Man, G-Man disappears and that company ceases to exist, like the company that he ran. So he murdered that man, right? Or that man was a real man and he's gone now?
Here's what the way that I conceived of it, I think no too, and the way I conceive of it that made it simple for me is just every time there's a fight, just replace that with like you're at a party and you meet Chris, or like you go to a shoot and you meet Chris Evans and there's a conversation that happens. And that's the minefield and the battlefield in the head of Scott is essentially what you're witnessing as a metaphoric kind of visual representation of that.
Buy that.
No one's murdering each other. He's just gamifying it because that's how his brain is abstracting it.
And it's certainly, to use a phrase that is, or to use a word that is completely overused, it's certainly problematic. It's absolutely problematic to frame communication and learning and growth through fighting and violence. That's like the strongest criticism against this narrative, obviously, is that Scott achieves growth through physically defeating her ex-boyfriends. That's bad and problematic.
And that his starting situation is everyone's ragging on him because he hasn't committed statutory rape yet. Or like asking if he's committed statutory rape yet. Yeah.
Yeah. That's also problematic if we want to get into it. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say actually a fun fact, or I don't know, a fact about the making of is that, pardon, they did Scott of Pilgrim's Game of Thrones style, meaning they made the film after the comic premiered, but before the comic wrapped up. And literally during filming, Brian Lee O'Malley, the writer and artist of the comic, started out thinking that Scott would be alone at the end. And personally, I would have been fine with that ending, because like you said, Daniel, even if he gets Ramona, I don't think this is like they're going to get married per se. No. I feel like this is a story of young people learning to grow up a little bit. So if he ended up alone but learned a lesson, I would have been fine with that. I'm also fine with him getting Ramona. But by the end of the series, Brian Lee O'Malley was like, I like Scott. I like Ramona. I can't resist. I want them to get together. So while that's happening, they shot this movie thinking that he would end up with knives. And I feel like you can tell. There are scenes that give away like we're building towards Knives being the one who becomes his second player, like teaches him how to respect other people. Ramona is too cool for him, so she can just go off into the atmosphere.
She has an immensely more interesting arc than both of the main characters.
And that's the thing is,
I was going to bring that up.
One of the only things. Sorry, I just want to finish the factoid. Is one of the only things that I think is a flaw in the film, and it's like can't be undone, and it does hurt me. Edgar Wright directed the actress who played Ramona Flowers to be flat, to have flat affect, because he knew it would be hard to make the audience want Knives and Scott to end up together, but that's what he wanted as the twist. So he was like, don't be too human, be pretty flat and dull and emotionless so that it's okay when you're like, well, I guess I could never understand that girl. She's just going to go. And then when the comic changed the ending, he changed the ending to match. And I do think it's weird because the whole time,
it's very
Knives
weird.
is so much more appealing and enjoyable to me as a human being than Ramona is because of her acting style, that at the end when he goes, and I finally ended up with Ramona, I'm like, so? Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I was going to bring that up only because when you first saw the movie, I remember when we talked about this, you said, I'm going to paraphrase you because I don't remember exactly what you said, but you said some version of, I think Scott chose wrong. I think he should have ended up with Knives. Like, that was your reaction to the movie. And I'm glad that you stuck with that all these years later, these 9 years later.
I know I'm implicitly endorsing statutory rape, but I just got to say, from a structuralist standpoint,
yes,
commit that statutory rape, Scott Pilgrim.
Jesus.
Also, I just want to say while we're on Knives, I don't think I've ever seen an actor better able to capture the idea of something that is not real. She acts exactly like a manga. Like, that actress's ability to do the eyes and the body motions, like suddenly changing body positions in the way that an anime character does, are phenomenal. It's amazing.
Yeah.
She looks like a comic book all the time.
Shout out
so
to
hard.
Ellen Wong.
Yeah.
She is perfect. Is she working right now? Is she doing stuff? Because she, if there was one like star turn in that movie, it was her. And I hope that she's working. Is she? Is she doing anything?
She's still doing TV and stuff like that. She's on a show called Dark Matter. I think it ended actually, but like she's worked in sci-fi and stuff like that. She doesn't have she's in Glow, the TV show.
Oh yeah, Glow. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, she hasn't really taken off. She's been in a few movies. She was in the Dave Eggers film with Emma Watson.
The Circle?
The Circle, yeah, and stuff like that.
Well, she's fantastic.
She's very good in this film.
Bread makes you fat. Yeah. Sorry, I'm scrolling through my notes.
Right.
Kieran Culkin, of course.
Did you say bread makes you fat?
Yeah. Bread makes you fat?
That's
one
a
great joke.
That's one of those things that I quote alone in my apartment. It's the thing that I say all the time. It's just like makes you fat? Like an iconic movie line for no reason. It's not Luke,
it's a
I am your father.
Yeah.
It's just like one of those things that just like that I just say anytime I look at bread. Say bread makes you fat.
Yeah, me too.
I also think, speaking of just the humor of Edgar Wright, some of my favorite visual jokes are the fucking vegan police.
Oh my god, the fucking high five.
That's the other one.
Yeah.
Thomas Jane from Arrested Development.
Also, I love when they bust in and they're like talking about the half and half. The laser's pointed at Todd's chest. They make boobs on.
Oh, okay.
Because like it's like a pinpoint and then has a larger circle, and that's like what their guns, which are also just their hands.
Yeah,
so it just nothing makes sense. It's just one of those things where. He's so good at that. He also does it in that sequence again where, what's his name? Brandon Routh, the Smallville Spider-Man, Superman.
He is not Smallville. He's
what is he?
Piece of shit. Brian
Superman
Singer's
Returns.
Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, he's Brian Singer's Superman.
And when he does this character's voice, Todd Ingram's voice, he sounds so much like Paul Rudd I Googled forever to figure out if Paul Rudd did a voiceover, like a dub for it, but it's not. They
Oh,
just
that's weird.
sound the same.
Yeah,
he's
I agree,
Superman.
Abe. It's weird to Google forever.
But like when he is like floating and he has his full vegan powers and his eyes are white and his hair and all that stuff, and it's like he threw Scott through a bunch of walls. And then camera pans over to a door, which is another funny joke, kind of akin to when you think about like Hot Fuzz, like the Cornetto trilogy, like jumping over stuff as a deal. Like he has free access because he just made a hole in the wall. Pan over to a door, and then immediately he's teleported to. He's opening the door, and he's like, "Hello, I'm here now."
Right.
Like, so it's twofold. It's one, it's a funny joke because it's like, the expectation is he's got like teleportation powers, and it keeps the rhythm and the pacing of the film very quick. But in addition to that, it's also a joke about why is he using the door?
Right.
He doesn't have to use the door. That's a silly thing for a superhero to do. So it's just those little subtle hints that. They're not hilarious jokes, but they just are in every scene that give you what I would say the tone of Edgar Wright's like movies. You know, like it's entirely his own.
Yeah.
Dan, did you know all the voiceovers are Bill Hader?
I didn't actually.
No.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. I heard it and I was like, "Who is that?"
All the
guy who
voiceovers.
says-
So when they're like, meanwhile at the rocket or whatever, that's
and
Bill Hader.
Scott earned the power of self-respect and shit like that.
Man,
That's all
it's
Bill Hader.
like Bill Hader. I mean, he deserves it. But what a blessed life that it seems like every genius in comedy was like, "Hey, Bill, do you want to come and be a part of this?" Like he's written for
That's
South Park, and he just shows up everywhere.
I know.
He's a nice guy.
I had the same thought as like, he's connected to so many other crews that are not connected to each other. How does he know these motherfuckers? How did this happen? but he's great. Oh, the Ninja Game, that's a parody of Dance Dance Revolution. Everything's so well thought out. Yeah.
There's little.
Go ahead.
You go. No, you go.
because I'm gonna do like an abrupt topic change. So if you have something that's
fine.
I
more
also
on
was
topic.
going.
Okay.
I just like there's little trivia facts that make this like little Easter eggs that people never noticed that I noticed this time watching.
Yeah.
And I want to see if you guys noticed.
At this point, if people haven't seen it, I just want to say this, and then I think we should wrap up with our favorite Easter eggs. It's a movie about teen angst and dating with the most Easter eggs crammed in per square inch that more than any other film, as many as humanly possible.
We've not recapped it at all.
No,
We've
and
not
I don't think we
explained
need
to anyone what this movie is about.
Exactly, and that's what I'm realizing. But I think all you really need to say is that it's a high school dating movie, but why people like it is
It's not a high.
every frame
I
has
have
30
to correct
Easter
you,
eggs.
or
okay, sorry,
not correct
go
you,
ahead.
but disagree with you. It's not a high school dating movie. I feel
Coming of
strongly
age?
about this point that this is mid-20s, like Scott
College
Pilgrim was
dating kind of, actually.
very helpful to me to reflect on me as a 22 and 23-year-old to realize, I was an asshole for a couple of years. Which is
okay, but it's
separate
a
from high
growing
school,
up. It's a hey, let's all grow up a
Yes,
little bit
yeah.
movie,
which I don't
And,
think happens in high school.
But I think if you're like listening to this, deciding whether to watch it, the reason to watch it would be it's like every frame has 1,000 references to video games and comic books in the frame, and you can watch it 50 times and still
Sure.
decode like, oh shit, in that frame there's this in the background.
In
That
the
means
frame and
this.
in
I
the,
never noticed
the
that.
soundscape, someone will do something and it's like, oh, that's from Zelda, that's from Mario, that's from Sonic, like all the
Yeah,
sound
apparently
effects
one
too.
of the bass lines he plays is from the Final Fantasy II menu theme, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys.
Also, Beck wrote all of the Sex Bob-omb's music.
No, he
You
didn't
guys
write
know
all
that?
of. He didn't write all of them.
He
They're-
wrote Ramona, and he wrote all the music for what they play on stage.
Ramona,
No,
the
they
two-chord song.
used a bunch of different bands to record different songs for them to do.
No,
Oh,
for
right.
different.
But I think Beck wrote it. There's
Yeah.
Metric plays like other
Right.
the Clash at Demon Head and stuff
Yeah.
like that, which is Brie
I
Larson's
think it's
band.
a band-to-band ratio. Like Beck
Yes,
played
yes.
the Bob-ombs, the Metric played the Clash of Demon Head. The boys, who are the boys? I can't remember. Anyway, I also saw that IMDb factoid. Who has a radical subject change into Easter egg territory, probably.
I don't have
Well, I
into
think,
Easter egg territory at all.
Well,
Yeah,
then
you
do
go-
whatever.
you go,
it's
Daniel.
fine.
It's a thing that I feel like we need to bring up, and it's especially difficult to bring up because we are 3 white males and
It's very white. Yeah.
straight. And I feel like Edgar Wright, as great as he is, as much as I love him as a filmmaker, I don't think anyone could say that Edgar Wright has ever written a great female character, and
No.
this is certainly no exception. And on the one hand, your argument is like, and this is an argument that I've had for myself for my own writing, is like, well, I don't really know how to write women, so I mostly write comedy that is like 3 guys hanging out talking to each other, or like Agents of Correct, 2 guys hanging out talking to each other.
Yeah.
Which is what I assume Edgar Wright is doing, which is like, I'm going to write what I know, and what I know is guy hangout comedy stuff.
Right. Right.
Which underserves women tremendously. That's a thing that you can point to in all of his work. I don't think he's a sexist. I just think he doesn't necessarily
It's just not a
know
focus
or
for him.
want to.
Like he's not
yeah,
pushing
it's not a focus
himself.
for him. Yeah, like writing
Yeah.
like strong female characters. You can look at any movie that he's done, and there's none where it's like, oh my God, we love Rosamund Pike in World's End. We don't. She shows up to be
Sure.
lusted after,
She's-
and
Yeah.
and then gets sidelined for an hour, and then shows
And
up
I'd
at the
argue-
end to save the day.
Even in
And
space,
in-
Daisy and Simon Pegg are essentially just 2 gender-neutral, funny people. One happens to be a man and a woman. Like it
That
doesn't
wasn't
really
written
matter.
by Edgar Wright, though.
Oh,
That
yeah?
was written
Right.
by Jessica Hines and Simon Pegg.
Yeah.
who played
Well,
those roles.
I still
then-
feel that way. The jokes in space are thoroughly gender-neutral. It's like Simon Pegg or Jessica Hines could say each other's lines and it wouldn't matter.
And then in Scott Pilgrim, you could look at, like, let's talk about the women in this movie now. You've got Ramona, who is sort of, I mean, she's certainly badass, but she's mostly existed to be lusted after for no clear reason. It's one of those cases
People
where
talk about her
as
more than she
soon
talks
as
about
Scott
it. Yeah.
sees her, he has decided he's in love with her, and we
Do you
as
know
an
the girl
audience
with hair like
decide
this?
that's the right thing. Yeah.
Yes, that's
and
Ramona Flowers.
the other women, we've got Knives, who is another like sex object. She has, I would argue, the most depth of any woman in the movie.
Yeah.
And the rest are just like Aubrey Plaza is nagging and mad, and you've got Kim, who is mostly angry throughout this movie, like she because she loses the depth that she had in the comics. And you've got Anna Kendrick, who is also bizarrely sidelined as the sister character who just pops up every once in a while to again scold Scott Pilgrim for things that he's done wrong. And you know, who am I missing? What other female characters are in this movie?
Envy, who is just like that chick who cheated on me. You know, I would say
like
that
again, like
Yeah.
yeah, she's another character where it's like this. She's bad. Like her main
Yeah,
thing
and-
is bad woman.
the one that actually I think is damning is Ramona, because it seems it does feel missing. By the end of the movie, I felt like we don't understand Ramona or her motivations or what she's like, really. And I don't think it was because she's inherently mysterious. It's like we didn't take the time to do that.
No.
And that is a scripting thing. It's, you know, I agree with
Right.
you. And I did find it, like you said, problematic, and at the same time, like, well, I'm not really even here for that. I'm here for this, and this is firing in all cylinders. But
Right.
the problematic stuff is it feels not so much like, oh my God. Or like when Abe and I rewatched 40-Year-Old Virgin with Jamie Loftus for the show, we were like, holy shit, ideas about women really used to be backwards only 10, 12 years ago. When I watch Scott Pilgrim, I just feel like Edgar Wright doesn't want to investigate uniquely female topics because he feels unsuited to do that. And so he just abdicates it, and that's also not great. But it's not as bad as being a misogynist or whatever.
Right, yeah, it's not great.
somewhere in the middle.
That's why I want to talk to you about it, is because like in my own writing, I don't understand, because I have plenty of friends who are women who have told me you do not know how to write women, and I was like, yeah, you're right. and that's why I mostly don't. That's why I mostly write things that are male buddies hanging out. And I pose that question to you, like, should I learn to write women better, or should I stick to writing?
Always be learning, Daniel.
Should I stick to writing what I know? Like, because it feels like it would be disingenuous if I wrote
I think a good way to do
a comedy with 3 women in it. Like, I couldn't. I don't feel confident doing that.
That's the other end of the poll, and all I know is, like, I feel like we're going through this right now as a group, comedians and writers, and I also don't know. And I completely see both sides, because if someone said, right, like, you can't write Moonlight, you're not gay and you're not black, get your hands off the Moonlight screenplay, you monster. I'd be like, sure. But the other end of the spectrum is Daniel Kaluuya can't play the guy in Get Out. He's British, which Samuel L. Jackson actually gave him shit for on Twitter. He's like, it should be an American and, an African American.
Really?
And and I'm like, okay, well, because he's like, well, a British black person doesn't have the same relationship to all the issues Get Out is dealing with. And I'm like, I see that, but also this is all built on pretending. So I don't, like, Peter Pan is always played by a woman, on stage. I don't understand, because of course the other end would be everything is only documentaries. Like, you have to be what you are. Let's all just be honest now. And I still feel like, no. There has to be room for pretending and opening your mind to embody other people's points of views, because that's the whole fucking point.
Yeah.
And yet there's systemic racism and misogyny everywhere. I have no idea what the appropriate response is as a writer.
Right, because I think we both want to keep writing.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's difficult.
Yeah, I think the only, I kind of more or less agree with everything that you guys have said. Obviously, everyone needs to always be learning at all times, because if you're not learning, you're dying. But that said, I think there's something to just reading a lot more women's lit in general. And then like, if you have the opportunity, I always like to jump at the idea of co-writing with women, especially if there's female characters in any of my work, just because if you don't, you're losing a whole interesting part of the conversation, a new way to be funny, a new way to be interesting.
Yeah.
But those are all, Band-Aids on, frankly, a cultural bullet.
Yeah, just as someone who also, like, will write a sci-fi story about a space, like a gay space elf undergoing laser eye surgery, for example. I'm like, right, but if the story's like The Big Sick, do you have to find someone who's undergone a terminal illness and been in a coma and is a woman and has brown hair and is 5'9" to write it? It is hard to feel out. Obviously, I went too far to make my point, but it's an interesting process to feel out how much should you have literally experienced this if you're going to write about it.
Yeah, I think you can always, with a little thought and empathy, you can always figure out where the line is, Well,
I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah, but I don't know. There is a lot of solutions, and there's no solution, and we're going to have to be okay with that lack of security in that answer, as, being on the top of the food chain for so long in terms of movie making. Everyone can write white men's stories. Why? Because that's all they see.
It's generically accessible to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that.
There's always that. Yeah. All right.
You want to do some fun Easter eggies?
We should. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we end this, because I think some people will like just the amount of detail that they went in, and I'm sure everyone found a lot of the stuff themselves. And it's not, to me, this isn't about references. This is just little choice. This is like perfectly elucidates what's going on, and they did it in a subtle way. For example, stuff like after Ramona explains defeating the evil exes aspect, everything out of focus behind Ramona, there's this thing called a bokeh in camera terms, which is when out of focus lights look like circles.
Yeah,
people have seen this. you can actually adjust things in camera by making like a matte and putting it in the right spot, where you can actually custom make those bokeh. So everything out of focus behind Roma is X's, while everything behind Scott is hearts, because this is a scene about of lopsided love interest at this point.
Yeah,
so
literally the lens flares in part, meaning,
and then
in the same way
in
that go ahead.
Well, just at the final moment being that at the end of that scene in the bus, she accepts and agrees that they're officially dating. Her backgrounds, those bokehs are now hearts.
Yeah.
So it's just like one of those things where it's like they really thought about this kind of shit.
They thought about every goddamn second. When Brandon Routh's name pops up in the credits, there's 3 X's that appear for 1 frame each, just because he's the third evil X.
Right.
The X's is a thing all throughout. I'm always trying to find, because it increases from 1 to 7. I haven't found the 5X or the 6X, but I finally found the 4X when he's in the diner holding a Coke Zero can to his head after fighting Anne from Arrested Development. He there's like tile work in the background, and that's the 4X's. But apparently there is, an X that foreshadows each of the fights. And I have not been able to find the 5, 6, or 7 because it just gets too... It's one of those movies where there's so many Easter eggs, you can actually be like, is that an Easter egg? No, that's just a book on the shelf in the background. That's not an Easter egg. But it's hard not to imagine everything is.
Well, there are some stuff, like it's just little touches, like for example when Scott is growing bored of knives, and there's just a montage where they're doing the same exact date, but he's just not into it. When they're in the record store, he stands between sadcore and gloom rock.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas before it was all, it's just stuff like that where they're just like, all right, bring that in. Why would they do that? It literally whips through frame. You have to freeze it in order to read any of this stuff.
That's why it's a rewatchable movie. Like, it's definitely, I could watch it. I feel like it's a movie designed to be watched 5 times.
Yeah.
The one I noticed this time was that, of course I noticed that during every fight, there's at least one point where it does the classic side-scrolling shot a la Mortal Kombat. But what I noticed this time is that every time during that shot, Wallace always ends up saying some line that involves the word fight. Like, you should probably fight that guy. Oh, that's the guy you need to fight. And then when he's going to fight Gideon, he goes, what a perfect asshole. I take back everything I said. Finish him. So Wallace is the announcer from Mortal Kombat, from the Mortal Kombat universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I didn't notice until this time.
What do we feel about the movie?
I'll tell you this. I think it's fitting based on what the movie is, because this movie has a place in my heart, but it's a weird place because of the level of technical perfection. You saying that it was meant to be a musical makes me understand it more, because it always had a place in my heart, but it's a distant place. It doesn't feel like a real world to me. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be a real world. Whereas even though Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz are also very fake worlds, I felt like love and caring for particular people in those worlds. And with Scott Pilgrim, I do feel like I'm watching Cirque du Soleil, or just like a bunch of talented people showing off everything they can do. And that's good too. And I think that's why this conversation took the shape of like just appreciating the different visual aspects more than recapping the story. Because like we said, the story is like a good version of the OC or something, but with fighting and video game references. What it's all about is look at the miracle that happened in terms of collaboration on this film. Look how every department showed up and tried their best on the same day in order to get this to happen. That rarely happens.
It is both flawed and impressive.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know better than to ask Dan to plug stuff because he's just really nice and says something nice about us, and I hate that. So I think we'll just wrap up. I love you, dudes. This was fun. I always love talking to you.
That's very sweet.
Actually, I won't. I will leave you a little window just in case. Let's say not plugs, but like, I don't know, anything you're excited about? You got another fishing trip? What's coming up, Dan?
Yeah, what's up
in your world?
Here's what I'm excited about, and it's I'm very late to the game, but there's this show called Fleabag that is on Amazon, and it's so fucking good. I can't even stand it. It's 2 seasons. Every episode is 30 minutes long, and they're 6 episodes to both seasons, so it's just 12 episodes total, and it's so good.
Yeah.
It's one of the best things I've seen in the last
That's great to hear.
You're like
15
the
years of my
10th
life.
person to say
Please
that to
watch
me,
it.
so yeah, I will.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the thing I'm plugging.
We're
Watch
muscling our
Fleabag.
way through Handmaid's Tale
Give
first.
Amazon, give them the money.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. Cool.
Abers,
Yeah.
what's up?
What's up?
Alright.
Just chilling, dude.
Just chilling.
I
All right.
miss you. I miss you.
I miss you, dude, but I'll see you on Friday.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Good end
until
of the
next
podcast.
time, that's an
Yeah.
episode of
We rated this frame.
that. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!